So here we're going to do a communication analysis for Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street. He's a sales trainer. He's also been notorious for some of the fraud that he committed on Wall Street. And we're going to analyze the communication here as far as the persuasive languaging used and the frame control used here.
To me, they have very little credibility right now. I've been trying to settle this thing for years, and they've essentially stonewalled me at every step. So I've said enough about this. Let's move on.
Let me ask you this one thing,
let's move on, okay? Honestly, I'm ready. I'm not going to get attacked here. You're here, so I'm done with this. Next.
Okay, I'm done with this next. So he uses a very fast frame control method to shut down the communication on that topic, and he's very powerfully assertive here. I don't know what questions she was asking, but I'm going to proceed assuming that the questions really were invasive or they really were pushy questions. And of course, it's his right not to answer them. But notice how he refers to what she did by asking those questions as an attack. Kind of interesting language to use, a little bit violent language to use, right? He could have said, no, I don't think that's a respectful question. I don't want to answer that question. There's many ways he could have referred to that. Instead, he says, I won't be attacked. And that puts her on the defensive, and she says, oh, I'm not attacking you. But what's interesting here is notice how he's diverted the attention away from the original question she asked and put her on the defensive about what she said. He's now analyzing her communication and calling it, oh, it's an attack, right? This is a redefine. We redefine the behavior of the other person in order to control the frame.
I'm not attacking you.
No, but honestly,
I'm just.
You're a very nice woman, but you're starting to get to the point. It's obviously just a hatchet job here.
You're a very nice woman, but it's obviously getting to be a hatchet job. Now, I think he points out you're a very nice woman because he wants to point out what is going on. He's pointing out the metaframe. And this is pretty powerful because, again, every time he does that, he pushes the defensiveness onto her, right? The need to defend goes from him to her. He points out, you're a very nice lady, but this is turning into a hatchet job. So whether he was pointing out that she was a nice lady in order to say, hey, you're not acting in accordance with what you're projecting, right? You're projecting that you're this nice lady, but you're really doing this hatchet job. I'm not sure. But either way, it serves to take the conversation further away from the original line of questioning that he is avoiding. So notice how even though they're engaged in this dialogue now that's causing her to be defensive, we're getting further and further from the original line of questioning. And I would guarantee this is by design. I guarantee he was not as offended by the line of questioning as he's acting. And I think he really just didn't want to answer the question because he didn't like how it was framed. But instead, he's causing a bunch of drama by accusing her of attacking him and sort of framing her as almost manipulative here. I mean, when you say, hey, I realize you're a nice lady, but you're doing a hatchet job, it's almost implying some wrongdoing on her part. I think when he says, hey, you're this nice lady, he's pointing out the fact that he's not unwilling to push beyond the social norms or the social niceties. He's saying, look, I realize you're a nice lady, but I'm not going to be fooled by that fact when it comes to answering these questions.
Kind of pretty much ready to move on.
There's nothing hatchet about it.
Well,
there's nothing hatchet about it. Again, she's on the defense. She's not talking about the original line of questioning. I want you to notice in the next 10 seconds of this clip how his lips tighten up and how he becomes very sweaty. I'm not sure what to say about that, but it's just interesting little micro mannerisms you can notice. You're also noticing the narrowing of his eyes, which could be indicating sort of a contempt or disgust with the person who's asking him these questions. And, when he tightens his lips, what do you think that means, right? It's almost like somebody being interrogated. They're tightening their lips because they're holding something back. Now, again, I hate to use these generalizations to refer to body language, but they're just things that I want you to pay attention to because they're great observations. We can't know what his real intentions are just based off of little micro mannerisms with body language, but it's good to pay attention to that and start building our arsenal as far as what micro mannerisms we can recognize and what we could say about those micro mannerisms while also accepting the fact that body language reading is not always 100% accurate and 100% true. We're not mind readers, but we are developing the ability to have sensory acuity about our situation and our surroundings.
To me, there is.
Well, the last thing is that apparently you have an oral contract with your management, the Fordham Company. Is that an attempt to hide your income?
There's the narrowing of the eyes. Then he kind of physically waves it away, like saying, no, we're moving on, right? Good body language. He's laughing. I think he was, sometimes people will laugh too when they're asked a personal question that the person actually got them, and they'll kind of use laughter. Can't tell if that's what's going on here. Usually when that happens, there's some body language micromannerism that's counter to the smile. So you'll see like the eyes will be kind of angry, or they'll be wide open in sort of a surprise, even though they're laughing because they genuinely got caught. Can't really see a whole lot of that here. I think he is laughing because the question was absurd sounding enough that he could just laugh it off. And that's an element of frame control as well. If a question is really absurd, it doesn't really help your case to defend it, right? If somebody makes an absurd accusation that you're an alien from the planet Mars and, something like that, you're not going to really address it. Addressing it would be kind of ridiculous. It doesn't deserve to be addressed. So the way he waves his hand away is just showing her like, look, I'm not taking this seriously in the least. I'm going to laugh at this. It's ridiculous.
Next question.
I think the peanut gallery is going to start chiming in really quickly. We've been audited.
I think you can air what you want here out of this interview. It's done.
Look at her open mouth, right? Open mouth indicates surprise. You'll see open mouth indicates surprise, and also eyebrows being raised or eyes being wide open. It's sort of this, oh, I can't believe it. I'm so shocked. I can't believe you would run out of this interview. Well, guess what? And also, by the way,
Oh my God, you got to
look at her palms being the way they are here. That's open body language that indicates defensiveness and surprise, right? Her hands are open. I don't know what happened. I don't know what caused you to storm out of the room. Well, guess what? She knows. She's actually looking to kind of have a plausible deniability about the intensity of the question she asked. Now, while that is her job to ask questions, she was well aware that the question she was asking could have resulted in him storming out of the interview or refusing to answer questions. But right now, she's framing herself as kind of the victim here. It's kind of an interesting dynamic because you have two people that really aren't taking ownership of the situation, right? They're not actually addressing what is being said. He refused to address her original questions in any kind of meaningful way. Instead, he went on the attack. He framed her as, attacking him, right? And she wasn't at least taking some ownership over the fact that, yeah, she really was asking questions that would put probably anybody in the defensive situation in Jordan's case, or at least it's to the point where it wouldn't be surprising to her, right? But watch how she sort of tries to steal back the frame by looking like, oh, I don't know what could have caused this. She knows because that's her job.
a lot of nerve, boy. I'll tell you. Honestly, really. Honestly.
Why
really,
can't I
that is
ask
just
these
honestly.
questions?
And I was.
Why can't I ask you these questions? Well, guess what? He didn't have a problem with you asking those questions or asking questions in general, which is kind of what she's appealing to. Why can't I ask these questions? Well, he didn't have a problem with you asking questions in general. He had a problem with the specific questions that you asked because of the way that they were framed, right? Oh, you have an oral contract. Was that so that you could avoid, she's making definite accusations with her questioning, even though it may be framed as, oh, I'm just asking questions. She knows, right? She knows, and she's not really taking ownership of that. But I wanted to point out a behavior that we see here from Jordan, which is what I refer to as histrionics, which is like an over-emotional reaction to a situation that might not truly reflect the emotion that the person is feeling in that situation. And people, narcissists, very toxic people will use histrionics to storm out of meetings, storm out of conversations with their relationship partner, things like that. And they do it to take the heat off of them about the original line of questioning. And the blowout that they have, the histrionics, will always be something small. So if you've ever been in a relationship and you've been with somebody that it just always manages to blow up into a very toxic, negative situation, even though, you had maybe legitimate concerns, the original concern could be something very small. You could be taking out the trash, right? And then it escalates, and all of a sudden they start bringing up things from the past. They start accusing you of turning them into a victim or attacking them. They'll bring up other times that you've said things in the past that were hurtful. They'll assign special meaning to it, and then they'll have this blowout, and you're going, what did I do? Well, just know that that's often by design, right? It's a tool that narcissistic people use in order to, guess what? Control the frame.
told us a friendly, nice.
And I don't know that that's what Jordan's doing here, but I'm just pointing that out as something to be aware of, that people who do that will often do it to control the frame when they know exactly what they're doing.
Interview, and no one has ever treated me as disrespectful as you have, really. Okay?
All right, okay.
Let's give it a whirl.
Big smile on Jordan's
Eventually,
face. Watch the
still
open body
displeased,
language
but more
See how he puts his hands out
displeased, but more
like a magician showing you, hey, I've got nothing up my sleeves. Now here he's saying, hey, I'm more open, I'm smiling, I'm happy. It's because he knows he successfully avoided those tough questions, right? That's what he wanted to begin with. He really wasn't that offended by the question she was asking, I'm sure, right? Or at least not to the point where he was angry and, self-righteous indignation or anything like that. He just wanted to avoid the line of questioning. He didn't want to talk about that on camera.
composed Jordan Belfort returned to finish the interview. What is your one greatest regret?
My greatest regret for sure is losing people money.
Losing people money. So I wanted to refer to that. So my biggest regret is losing people money. There's not a lot of ownership in that phrasing. Now, what he said is not factually wrong, right? That could be his biggest regret, losing people money. But the passiveness of that statement, it really shows no ownership over the fact that he lost the money. He didn't say, I lost people money. He said losing people money, right? As if it just happened on its own. And when we say losing, what exactly does that mean, right? We have an unspecified verb, losing people money, right? How did that come about? It's a vague way to refer to that. It came about because of fraudulent activities on his part, illegal activities that caused a lot of devastation to families and to people involved in his scams. And this was huge, the amount of people's lives that were affected by this, and he's not going to take ownership of that. But I wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. If I could have done, if people say, would you change anything? I said, I just wouldn't lose people money.
What would you say to...
I wouldn't lose people money. At least there he says, I wouldn't lose people money. But again, I wouldn't lose people money is a little different than saying I wouldn't have committed fraud, I wouldn't have broken the law, I wouldn't have devastated families. So again, not factually incorrect, but not the highest level of ownership that one could take over a situation that wreaked that much havoc onto people's lives.
the victims?
Wow, first, of course, wouldn't lose people money.
What would you say to the victims?
What would you say to the victims?
Wow, first, of course, I'm sorry for what happened, and
I'm sorry for what happened. Okay, these are the subtleties of the languaging I want to point out. So originally this clip was about the frame control that he was using when he shut down the interviewer, right? By saying, hey, let's move on. Very powerful. But I'm pointing out the frame control that's going on even in something as simple as this apology, right? For what happened, right? Very passive language. Anything could just happen, right? A meteorite could just happen to hit the earth. He's not taking ownership of it. It's what he did, right? And so it's a very evasive apology. Now, on the surface, to anyone listening, it's this passive voice, right? So let me give you an example. If the government refers to civilian casualties in another country, the president would say, there were casualties, civilian lives were lost. It's called the passive voice, right? It's wording things in a way that puts distance between the person who actually carried out the orders or who actually sent out the orders. It takes the blame away from them, and it unconsciously makes the listener hear that as just, oh, things happened. Like, yeah, it's just a random cause and effect event. It wasn't random. It was very, very specific actions that he took that devastated lives.
that not a day goes by in my own life where, I in some way don't pay for it. And if you look at other people in my position.
Not a day goes by in my life where I don't in some way pay for it. Now, this could be interpreted two ways. When you're giving an apology, it's good to let the victim know at some point that the benefit you thought you were going to gain from it, you didn't get it, right? So a guy who cheats in a relationship is supposed to say, well, I didn't even enjoy it in the least, when probably he did. But the point is, it's more therapeutic to say to somebody, hey, the benefits I got from stealing the money, I didn't really get the benefits. I was tormented every day about what had happened, tormented by guilt. The money didn't bring me the joy. Whatever it is, if you're apologizing, yes, it's good to do that. But the problem with what he says here is he immediately takes the focus off of the victims and puts it on himself, as if he's some sort of victim, or as if we should feel sorry for him. And obviously we shouldn't, right? Not a day goes by where I don't in some way pay for this. So there's two ways to interpret that. Either he's giving the victims some sort of, therapeutic statement that, hey, I am in fact paying for my crimes, but he's also denying their pain in this. And he only briefly touched on what they experienced. He didn't really touch on their experience at all. He just said, I'm sorry, things happened, I pay for it, let's move on, is kind of the overall point here.
People in my position, I'm the only one. And if you look at other people in my position, I'm the only one who over the long term has been paying back investors. So
if you look at other people in my position, this is what I refer to as whataboutism. This is where you point out other things that the other person has done that were wrong. You compare yourself to other people who have been in your shoes where you acted better, right? It's a sort of context reframe. It's saying, yes, I did the thing, but it could have been much worse, right? He's saying, look, compared to other people who don't pay people back, I'm proud of that, is what he's about to say. So the interesting thing there is, if you have to, in order to make your behaviors look good, if you have to compare them to people who steal from others and then don't pay them back, if that's who you have to compare yourself to in order to make your behaviors look better, then there's a problem with that, right? So to the victims, like to somebody who just hears this, they're going, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. He's actually paying them back. But you gotta consider this too. It's his legal obligation to do so, right? He's not going to remain in business without paying some type of restitution. And I would venture to say that he's probably making the minimum required restitutions, if that.
and I'm proud of that. And my goal one day would be to pay back all the money.
My goal would be to pay back all the money. My goal, right? So he's saying my goal. He's not saying this is what I'm going to do. He's saying my goal. And then he adds even more hedging to it. He says would be. That's called future hypothetical language. We could, yeah, maybe. We're talking about future hypothetical or possibilities. So again, he's not taking ownership of the situation. Again, he's pushing off, his responsibilities, being very vague about whether or not he's going to pay these people back.
Can I? I hope so. No guarantees.
Can I? I hope so. Again, he's showing that it's out of his control. Can I pay them back? I hope so. No guarantees. Okay, so let me ask you, if that was your dad who had invested in one of his phony, stock situations, had lost a bunch of money, right? Lost all his retirement. Would you be sitting there listening to that apology and actually going, yeah, wow, yeah, Jordan really is not as bad as people who are not paying anything back? No, zero ownership of that. Zero ownership. So I wanted to point that out, because if you're just casually listening to that, it's going to sound like it's going to sound like an apology. It really wasn't. It was, I'm sorry, followed by all the ways that he's been hurt and all the ways in which his behavior is acceptable, but only if we compare it to much worse people. Well, guess what? You can justify any behavior if you compare it to worse people, right? If you have to contrast with horrific people, terrible people. Anyway, not to hate on Jordan here, but I wanted to point out the communication here, because I think there's a lot of subtleties we miss and a lot of things we can learn, a lot of things that if we train our ears to be able to pick up, we can avoid these types of manipulative language being used on us in everyday situations. Thank you.